August 12, 1943. Just past sunset. The train wheels hummed steadily as it crossed into Kansas. Inside the passenger car, Oberfeldwebel Heinz Keller, once a proud non-commissioned officer of the Afrika Korps, sat with his forehead resting lightly against the cool window pane. For hours he'd said nothing. Not to his fellow prisoners. Not to the American Guard. Not even to himself. But what he saw outside, what all of them saw, was unraveling everything he had once believed. Miles of golden fields, still lit long after the sun had set, stretched endlessly in all directions. Grain elevators towered like monuments to an invisible power. The skies above them, still glowing from the towns behind, made it feel as if night hadn't yet arrived. In Germany, Heinz would later write, we turned off every light. Here, they leave them on even where no one stands to see them. The car fell silent as the train slowed near Abilene. Outside, in the dim warmth of a summer night, they could see hundreds of parked vehicles, Fords, Dodges, Chevrolets. Private automobiles. More in one small town than in all of Stuttgart. In Germany, owning a car meant prestige. Here, even rail workers and shop clerks drove their own. The men didn't speak, but Heinz saw their eyes wide, disoriented, and searching for explanation. The camp they were headed to, Camp Concordia, was still hours away. But already, Kansas was becoming something more than a state. It was becoming a challenge to their identity. 2 cars ahead, Hauptmann Joseph Merkel, once a strict believer in German discipline, was furiously scribbling into a small leather-bound book he had managed to keep hidden. The American farms stretch for miles, he wrote. No fences. No guards. Just machines. Machines doing the work of men. They had passed a wheat field so large it looked like a sea in there. Almost like a hallucination was a single combine harvester, crawling across the golden land with mechanical grace. One machine. No crew, no shouting. Just steel, sun, and silence. It did in 1 hour, Joseph wrote, what my entire village could not do in a week. But the breaking point came in Salina. The train slowed again as it passed a livestock yard. Tens of thousands of cattle, herded with trucks, not men. The prisoners watched in disbelief as workers, young boys, old men, even women ate lunch on wooden benches near the rails. Thick sandwiches, meat spilling from the sides. Bottled soda, pie. One guard, a lanky farmhand from Nebraska, stepped aboard the car with a box of food. You boys hungry? He said casually. He handed out white paper bags without ceremony. Inside each, a hamburger, a slice of apple pie, and a carton of milk. Real milk, cold, fresh. Heinz held the sandwich in his hand but couldn't eat. Not yet. His voice was barely audible when he said, this can't be for us. The train pulled away slowly, its steel wheels grinding against the rails like the turning of some ancient truth. In the fading distance behind them, the Salina yard vanished, but the impact lingered. Heinz finally bit into the hamburger. The taste, simple and warm, almost childlike in its familiarity, made his chest tighten. He wasn't hungry, he was ashamed. Ashamed of what he had believed. Ashamed of how little his own people had. Ashamed of how far the Reich had lied. No propaganda could prepare a man for kindness from an enemy, or for food that reminded him of home before war ever touched it. Hours later, they arrived at Camp Concordia. There were no bayonets waiting. No dogs barking. Just floodlights humming overhead and guards who looked like schoolteachers in uniform. As the men were sorted, Heinz kept looking upward. Not at the fences, but at the tall poles strung with electric lights. They buzzed all night. A soft, steady sound of luxury. Back home, one soldier whispered, we burned wood to see our hands at night. But here, even the prisoner camps glowed. The next morning, the real breakdown began. They were taken in groups across the county to work on local farms. Heinz was sent to a wheat operation outside of Salina, where a 16-year-old American boy named Robert showed him how to use a tractor worth more than Heinz's entire childhood home. This isn't even the best one, Robert laughed, wiping his oily hands on his overalls. My dad's waiting on a new model next spring. That night, Heinz sat on his bunk and stared at the floor. I watched a child, he later wrote in his diary, control more horsepower in one afternoon than our entire battalion used in North Africa. What broke him wasn't the machinery. It was how casually it was used. As if abundance had no cost. As if the land itself produced prosperity on command. And all of it, every light bulb, every engine, every hamburger. It was normal. Not for generals, but for farmers. The next day, they were assigned to a sugar beet plant. There, Heinz saw something he would never forget. A conveyor line, operated by women and older men, humming with rhythm. Cans sealed by the thousands. Stainless steel tanks steaming with precision. Everything powered by electricity, every corner lit, every corridor swept clean. The foreman, an elderly woman named Helen, handed Heinz a pair of gloves and a coffee. "We treat prisoners with respect here," she said. "Work hard. That's all we ask." Heinz didn't reply. He couldn't. That night, he wept silently in his bunk. Not from pain, not from fear, but from humiliation. He had grown up believing Germans were the apex of civilization. But Kansas had exposed a truth he couldn't deny. They had lost long before the war began. Not because of tanks. Not because of bombs. But because they had tried to conquer a nation that had already built a better world quietly, methodically, and without hate.